Hey, what's up, everybody? No video review for a movie this week. I wasn't able to go to the movies, but I do want to try a new video format. I'm actually going to edit the video for once before I put it online rather than just posting the raw MPEG-4. But this week I want to talk about something that's been it's been interesting to me, and it's something that's kind of been important in my life for, since I was a kid. But that's video game ghost stories and urban legends. And, I think it strikes an interesting chord with society, the way these video games are so complicated. The idea of a ghost haunting a video game is really intriguing because, glitches happen all the times in games. And, you can't be sure if what you're seeing, if a game starts acting weird, which they do all the time, you can't be sure if what you're seeing is a glitch or a ghost. And so I think they strike an interesting chord between believability and, creepiness. So I want to talk about a couple of video game urban legends from a couple different ranges around the spectrum, why I like them in particular, why I think they struck chords with, people across the world, because a lot of these are fairly common. I'm sure if you look them up, you'll find them in a heartbeat. So there's four stories I want to talk about. The first one is for a game called Polybius. And this is probably the most plausible of all the stories. In fact, I would almost say it's likely this one is true. But we'll get into that in a minute. So the story is in 1981 in Portland, Oregon, in a couple of different arcades around the area, a strange game started appearing in the arcades called Polybius. Now, the only thing that remains of this game is the title screen and an old black and white picture of the box. And, here's what the title screen looked like. But the box itself was very plain. It was just, one big black arcade box, and it just had, the scroll marquee across the top that just said Polybius. And so supposedly the story goes is that the game was kind of weird. It was based off of an Atari game, and it added a couple of extra elements in, such as mazes and like light tunnels and things. And apparently when it appeared, there were lines, out the stores for people to play this game. People were playing it left and right. It had no marketing or anything. There was nothing on the box, on the arcade cabinet to show what it was about. It was just a blank black cabinet, and these people were playing the hell out of it. These kids, I should say. And then weird things started happening. A lot of the kids started getting like weird side effects. They were having amnesia, insomnia, nightmares, night terrors. Some of them got depressed. Some committed suicide after playing this. And where it gets really weird is the machine was then supposedly visited by men in black suits every once in a while. And then after a while, the games just disappeared out of the arcades. So all they have now is that title screen picture of it and then the black and white picture of the box itself. And, so that seems kind of weird. You would say, oh, that's just an urban legend, and that's not real. Well, there's a couple reasons why this one might actually be true. We do know that in the late 1970s, and I think it might have even been in the 60s, the CIA actually did conduct experiments on Americans, on American civilians, and they did experiments using LSD. So, it was a little later. This was a couple years later, but the CIA has actually admitted to testing LSD on American citizens. And I'll have to look up. I'll probably post another video about that if anyone's interested in it. But without going into too much detail, they basically introduced LSD into the water supply of a town and just kind of watched how the people reacted. And it caused a lot of people to get killed, to die. So, is it so implausible if merely a few years after that, certainly, decades before the CIA ever admitted to doing this, is it, that they were testing video games to see if you could, use video games on children as a form of mind control or, brainwashing, and a lot of these symptoms, the amnesia and the insomnia and the nightmares and the depression, those are symptoms of LSD. So, isn't it possible that maybe the CIA, which the CIA did approach Atari about remaking one of their games. There was never revealed which game, but the CIA did approach Atari around this time, and they created this game. So is it so implausible that they approached Atari to recreate one of their games with a few extra features, and then they had a method of using the game arcade cabinet to, essentially get people in contact with LSD while they're playing a game that has a lot of bright flashing lights and, really surrealistic visuals. And actually, I have some pictures here that I can post up like this and this of what the game looked like while it was playing theoretically. These are pictures from someone who's remade the game based on, stories. This isn't from the original. But, you can imagine if you're on acid and trying to play something like this, especially if you're, a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old kid, crazy things might happen. So, while there's no proof that this ever existed, that's certainly interesting. It's certainly plausible that the government did perform experiments like that. And, of course, the Men in Black would be the government officials coming to collect data from the machine. So, definitely surprisingly plausible for that one. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. That one still sits within the realm of realism. The next game I want to talk about is a game called Kill Switch. Now, there is a game called Kill Switch. It's a first-person shooter in 2003. Not the same game. This is a game from 1989, developed by the Carvina Corporation. And it was an adventure game, similar to Myst or Silent Hill. And the gimmick is that the game can only be played once. Once the game has been finished, once you either get a game over or you beat the game, it erases itself, which is interesting. Which is not in terms of coding something into a program, that is certainly possible. Where it starts to get a little out there, though, is that it was copy protected and there was no way to duplicate the game. That's a little out there because you can usually duplicate it. Even if the game erased itself, you can usually recover the data, and there are no surviving copies of this game. But the story was surprisingly interesting. It was an adventure game and it was a ghost story, and you had to pick one of two characters. A character called Porto was a girl. She wakes up in an abandoned mine after a cave-in, and the whole game is her trying to find her way out. And as she's coming out of the mine, she starts to see ghosts. She starts to, fight monsters. Mostly she just had to hide and run. There wasn't much combat in the game. And, at the end of the game, you start unraveling the story of what happened to these miners and how a company, a coal mining corporation called Sovitic, had essentially left them for dead. So it was interesting, certainly, how that was set up. And then the other character was called Gast. The other character is a ghost, one of the demons that's haunting the mine. And the character was invisible. I mean, completely invisible. The player literally could not see their own character on the screen. No one was ever able to beat the game with Gast because, you couldn't get past the first couple of levels. You can't see your character. You can't do anything. So no one knows what it would have been like at what happened at the end with Gast. They've only been able to beat it with Porto. But this game certainly strikes an interesting chord because it is possible to make a game that erases itself after you beat it or get a game over. And the game content itself is really creepy. Now, there's still nothing really supernatural about this. This is just, theoretically could just be a developer going crazy and making something super unique. But it's just surprisingly interesting how these urban legends are structured. How they tip the line, or they walk a balancing act between being plausible and implausible, because so many people don't understand games. The next one I want to talk about, though, starts to get much more into the paranormal, and it's actually with a game that not only have I played to death, millions of people have played to death. It's one of the most popular games in history. Pokemon, particularly Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green, the original Generation 1 games. And most of these stories, there's actually hundreds of different, ghost stories involving Pokemon, involving especially the first generation, because there's something off about the Pokemon world. Just in a regular Pokemon Red and Blue and Yellow and Green, a regular Pokemon Generation 1 game, the world is just a little bit off kilter. In all the Pokemon games it is, but especially in Generation 1, and it very much strikes an uncanny valley effect, which I actually talk about in my blog. Maybe I'll make a video about that later. But one of the most disturbing sections in the game, it really affected me when I was a kid, and I think it traumatized a lot of kids around the world, was Lavender Town. Now, Lavender Town is a place you get to about halfway through the game, give or take, and there's not much to do there. There's the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town that you have to make your way up, but for the most part, it's a fairly, low-featured city in the game, but it's probably one of the most, if not the most memorable place in the game, aside from maybe Cinnabar Island, because Lavender Town was the ghost town. And it was apparent, from the moment you walk into Lavender Town, especially if you had an original Japanese Pokemon Green cartridge with the original Lavender Town theme, it's disturbing. The original Lavender Town theme is terrifying. It's so creepy. And actually, I'll play it right now so you can hear. Yeah. It's Lavender Town is especially for a little kid, a 6 or 7 or 8 year old who's playing Pokemon, this lighthearted adventure about fighting animals. You get into this town and you just hear that theme, and it sticks with you. It's very eerie. There aren't many video game themes I think that can actually creep people out as much as the Lavender Town theme did. But that's not all there is in Lavender Town. That's just the overhead music. Lavender Town is populated, if you talk to the NPCs, they're all talking about ghosts. They're all, there's one that asks you, do you believe in ghosts? And if you say yes or no, and if you say yes, they go, another believer. And there's a lot of psychics. And if you go into the Pokemon Tower, there's the Pokemon Tower is like a Pokemon graveyard. It's filled with tombstones where people have buried dead Pokemon. And up until this point, anytime you got into a wild encounter, it was just with a wild Pokemon. But in the tower, in the Pokemon Tower, when you first go in and you go into your wild encounter, you actually encounter a ghost. And every encounter in the Pokemon Tower is with a ghost, and you can't fight them. You have to run. And there's people in there, NPCs that claim to be possessed by demons, and some that are grieving the loss of their Pokemon. And you can't get very far. You can't do much until you go back and get the Sylph Scope, which lets you see through the ghost and see the actual Pokemon. But the thing is, these Pokemon are still, they're ghost-type Pokemon. You fight, you see a Ghastly and a Haunter and a Gengar. Well, Ghastly and Haunter. Gengar's. But they're ghost-type Pokemon. And then you see Cubone, which is interesting. because Cubone is actually one of the most morbid Pokemon in the original generation series. Cubone is a Pokemon. He's like a little dinosaur thing, and he's wearing his mother's skull. His mother was a Kangaskhan. It's not official in the actual game, but you can see if you look in the game code. And yeah, so its mother died, and it's wearing her skull like a helmet. And it carries one of its mother's bones that it uses as a club, which is really interesting because it's not a ghost type; it's a normal type Pokemon. And you go through the Pokemon Tower, and it gets kind of stranger and stranger, and so just Lavender Town in and of itself in the in a normal game is really creepy, and it's for a lot of kids it was kind of traumatizing because in the middle of this game suddenly you're in Lavender Town, and what's worse is in a Pokemon game, Pokemon can't die. No matter what the situation is in game, you could have a level 100 Charizard, do Flamethrower or Fire Blast and hit a level 2 Bellsprout. Basically a giant fire-breathing dragon lights a flower on fire. But, it doesn't die, it just faints, which is kind of unusual. And that's where the Uncanny Valley effect of Lavender Town comes in, because the Pokemon never die in battle. So suddenly going to a Pokemon graveyard, it's really jarring. And I think that's one of the biggest things with Pokemon. And actually, it leads to a lot of theories, such as, the Pokemon world is stuck in a time loop. Nothing can die. But, historically, things have died before that. So there's all kinds of theories behind this. You just go on the internet and search, Lavender Town ghost stories. But there are some that are, really specific. The most prominent one, I think, is called Pokemon Creepy Black, where a person had bought a copy of Pokemon Red online, and it came in a black cartridge with a blank label that was just a black label that just said Pokemon. It didn't say Pokemon Red version or Blue version or anything. And, right from the beginning, the title screen is messed up. And the whole the whole game is glitchy. And there was when he started, there was a character in his party called Ghost, and it was the Ghost sprite that they used, but instead of being white, it was black. So it was the Ghost sprite from the Lavender Town Tower, but it was black, and it was in his party from the beginning, and it only knew one move: Curse. So supposedly, as the player is progressing through this game, whenever he uses Ghost, whenever he uses that attack Curse on an opposing Pokemon, the screen goes black and you can hear the Pokemon's cry, because every Pokemon has an individual cry, but it goes at half speed, and then it goes back to normal and the battle resumes like normal. But when you beat the Pokemon, it doesn't say the Pokemon fainted, it says they died. And then when you look at your opponent's party, you can see that the Pokemon doesn't exist in their party anymore. Normally it'll just faint and you'll see a little blacked out Pokeball, but if you hit it with Curse and then beat it, the Pokeball completely disappears from your opponent's party. So, you killed the Pokemon. And after every battle, supposedly you're given a choice to run or curse the trainer. And if you curse the trainer, you actually kill the opposing trainer in the game. Which in and of itself is creepy. But, so supposedly the player goes on, and the game is, continuously gets more and more glitched, and, he finally beats the game. And after he beats the game, he wakes up in Pallet Town, which is, where the starting point in the game. And he's got the old man sprite. He doesn't have the regular character sprite. He moves at half speed, and he goes around Pallet Town with no music, just walking at half speed, and no Pokemon in his party, which is interesting because up until this point, you couldn't remove Ghost from your party. You couldn't set it free. You couldn't put it in the box. you couldn't do anything. It was just there. So, supposedly, if the character goes back to their house in Pallet Town, back up into their room, and to the exact point in the world where they start, where the start of the game, where you're at the beginning, it'll trigger a battle. And it's a battle with Ghost. And you don't have any Pokemon. So, whenever you attack, all you can do is kind of whimper, and it slowly takes off some of your health. And then Ghost, whenever it's his turn to attack, just sends out, an ellipsis, just a ... He just kind of looks at you. And so this whole battle, he's just staring at you, and you're just slowly dying. And when your health gets to the critical point, Ghost then uses Curse. And supposedly the game screen goes black, and then comes back to a modified version of the start screen at the very, the start game screen, and your, save file is gone. And it's, the idea is that Ghost killed the player, and you have to start a new game. So, this is really elaborate, certainly, but it's still not completely implausible, because this could just be a ROM hack, and there are actually, people who have tried to recreate this ROM hack online. You can actually go download a Pokemon Creepy Black ROM and play it on an emulator. So, that's kind of an interesting... It's an interesting thing, and the idea is that it was haunted. But, there's nothing affecting the real world. There are other stories, such as people having their actual lives be affected. Like people start being haunted after playing, some third-party bootleg or glitched Pokemon game. And they're always Generation 1, or almost always. There's a few for the later generations. And most of the time they all tie back to Lavender Town in some way or another. In this one, the Ghost was the Ghost Sprite from Lavender Town. And the Tombstones are the Tombstone Sprites from the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town. So, that's kind of interesting. But it's still not completely outside the realm of plausibility. And that's the key here. None of these urban legends are completely outside the realm of possibility. But the thing about Pokemon is, it's especially Generation 1, it was such a simple game in terms of how it was programmed, because it had to be. It was for the original Game Boy. And it's been, people have dissected it so much, they know exactly how every call in the game is made for the, for the programming. They can literally glitch the game to make things that you couldn't otherwise get happen. They've figured out exactly how the programming works. And a lot of the stuff that supposedly happens is well outside the programming. And there's plenty of others, such as a character being haunted in Fire Red, the remake, by the main character from his original Red game. There's all kinds of stuff involving Pokemon Generation 1. And I urge you to, go look it up yourself if you're interested. But the next, the last thing I want to talk about is the haunting, the sort of the Majora's Mask scary story. And, I don't have all the details, and this is going to be a quick overview. But Majora's Mask, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, is already a really creepy video game. And what's worse is it's subtly creepy. It's very much in the uncanny valley, because the game itself follows on from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And while it's not overt in the beginning of Majora's Mask, the idea is that your character is dead. Your character from the Ocarina of Time is dead, and this is him just waking up after having died, and he has to go through the 5 stages of grief throughout his adventure in Majora's Mask, and it's essentially him accepting his fate. And because of the time limit, you have to replay these events in the game over and over again until you make it through all 5 stages, and that's when you beat the game. So already it's an inherently creepy game, because the whole idea is your character's dead, and it's about accepting the fact that you've died. And this is clearly evident in the world, such as, you see all the characters from Ocarina of Time, in Majora's Mask. And this can be explained by Nintendo didn't want to spend the money to make more character models. But, it's just interesting. It's sort of him kind of going back through his life. Um, but so this ghost story involves a guy who got a copy of this game at a yard sale a couple years ago, and because it was a Nintendo 64 game, and it didn't have a label. It was just a blank cartridge that had a torn off label, and someone had written Majora on it. And so he took it home, and there was a save file on there, but he didn't want to erase it because it was nearly 100%. Supposedly, the previous owner was a child who had cancer and had died before he'd completely beaten the game. And so this guy started a new file, and weird things happened, such as, some of the songs, the music was playing in reverse. One of the characters, Skull Kid, who's basically like a skeleton wearing a mask, showing up in random locations, and like him getting trapped on top of a clock tower in a battle with Skull Kid over and over again. I don't have all the details because this is a very long, intricate story, a lot longer than the Pokemon Creepy Black one. But what's important, I think, about these, and what I like about them, is they take something, especially the Legend of Zelda and the Pokemon ones, take very innocent games. Even Majora's Mask, which was about accepting your death, was very, you have to really analyze the game. It doesn't straight up tell you that. It's there in the subtext if you really look for it. It's, most people have actually kind of, shown all the little details that show this is, most likely true. But they take these games that are innocent, but also fall well within the realm of the Uncanny Valley, especially Pokemon. And they really kind of play with the idea of what it would be like to have a haunted video game. Because, there's always ghosts in the machine, bugs and glitches. And so you can't ever be, sure if... you can't ever be sure if what you're seeing is actually a haunting or if it's just a glitch. And I think that's the beauty of these ghost stories, because they do have a realm of plausibility to them, but at the same time they're they're very scary. I actually recently just pulled out my copy of Pokemon Fire Red, which is a remake of the first generation, and I noticed the Lavender Town theme it wasn't as creepy. I think Nintendo had changed it. So it's these stories, these games have affected us on such a our generation especially, on such a massive scale. I think the idea of video game ghost stories is really cool, and I think it's sort of the new haunted woods or haunted mansion for the new generation, because our parents' generation growing up, they would go explore the woods and they'd go explore abandoned houses and things. And so that's where their ghost stories come from. And ours were playing video games, playing Pokemon and playing Legend of Zelda. And so it's sort of an interesting way to see how society changes. And certainly I'm more drawn to video game ghost stories than, previous generations would be, and certainly other ghost stories, because I love video games. I grew up on video games. And, I just think it's a cool look into, our general psyche of the video game generation. And I'm curious to see, what comes of it in the future. It is worth noting, though, a lot of these ghost stories definitely happen on older games. I think, Majora's Mask is by far the newest game of those four. Most of these are of the really old games that were really obscure in how they could convey their message anyway. Polybius was from the early 80s, so that was probably just a game about triangles and lines. Pokemon, I think, is probably one of the newer ones, but these stories definitely get more elaborate as the games get more complex. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to talk about, something I've been doing a lot of reading into lately. And, it's something I like reading about, and certainly these ghost stories can get pretty scary. I've scared myself a few times reading some of them, in the dark here in the middle of the night. So, Anyway, if you guys know of any stories, let me know. Post in the comments, post on my Facebook. Um, if you think I should make more videos about ghost stories and video games and urban legends, and make things that are a bit scarier, let me know. Let me know what you think of this video. This is kind of a test video, not just for the new editing, but for actually testing a new type of content. So anyway, until next time, have a good one.